All right, everyone. You are all very welcome to our COVID-19 and future forecasting business webinar today. The voice you are hearing is Dr. Erin Hinson. Dr. Kristen Donnelly will be is joining us right now, but will be speaking in a few minutes. We hope wherever you are in the world and whenever you are listening to this, that you are as safe and as well and as healthy as is possible during this extraordinary. I saw a friend of mine commented and said, we need more words besides unprecedented, because I'm getting tired of unprecedented, but it is really an unprecedented time until we start developing some other synonyms to use. But we wanted to take this opportunity to share some of our insights that we have had over the changes that we think are potentially coming, as much as we can know. So let's start by seeing where we are going to go. We love roadmaps here at Abbey Research. So where are we going today? First, we are going to explain who the heck we are in case you don't know us. So we'll talk about who the good doctors are. We'll talk about what we know about COVID-19 so far and what we don't know, which is a lot more than what we know. But we will then shift towards talking about what we think some of our predictions are for a longer term impact on business and work culture. We're already seeing a lot of short term changes, which we'll talk about as well, but we're focused kind of more on looking at long term impacts. And then we will have, as always, tips for managing business related changes. We're very lucky to have Dr. Kristen, in a way, tapped into the business world as she is in her other roles for our parent companies. And she's got a lot of insights from everything she's had to learn kind of by fire hydrant in the last few weeks. And then we'll finish up, as always, by talking about how we can help, if we can, with whatever is going on in your business or work life. So introducing the good doctors, this is our lovely photograph here. I'm Dr. Erin Hinson, and I am the curly-haired one in this photo.
And I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly, and I have the glasses.
We met coming up almost on 10 years ago, when we were doing our social science degrees in Northern Ireland on things very, very different to the business world that we now work in. But we utilize our combined over 30 years of research and business experience to bring insights into small businesses and nonprofits. And we like to say that we're saving the workplace one hard and healing conversation at a time. And boy, do we have a hard conversation to have today. And hopefully we'll be able to provide some useful insights for you. But all of this training has, in studying people and cultures, has enabled us to analyze data very quickly, answer questions that we have asked and that others have asked us, and hopefully be helpful within the market. We will be taking questions. Before we get into the content of this webinar, I wanted to just say we will be taking questions for those of you joining us live. So if you have questions as we're going along, we have designated time at the end to answer them. So just, if you can, type the questions into the chat box. If you're looking at your screen and you're not sure where that is, down towards the bottom, there is a chat icon, and you can click on that. And if you type your questions in, we'll be monitoring them. If anything comes up that immediately needs answered, we'll address that, but we're gonna save that for the last few minutes before we sign off from you guys. So if you do have any questions, be sure and ask them. And before we jump into the content, this is kind of a different version of our roadmap, how we structure pretty much everything we do at Abbey Research on the basis of this hourglass idea. So today we're going to start with the generic, some of the bigger things that we do and we don't know about COVID-19, the coronavirus. We're going to move into the specific to talk specifically about work cultures. And then at the end, we're going to end with some action and some tips that we think you can hopefully apply directly to whatever your rapidly changing work situation is, whatever you are doing or wherever you are.
Yeah, I said yesterday, no, not even yesterday, because every day is 4 years long. I said this morning to Dr. Erin that I'm not 100% positive I can plan for my company past Wednesday. And even that feels generous. So for anyone who's joining us who I have not spoken about this before, I also serve as the Chief Operating Officer for our family network of companies, which is Abbey Research's parent company. We are remaining open because our flagship company supplies the pharmaceutical and diagnostic industries with stains that diagnose cancer. And we're pretty much the exclusive supplier globally for those stains. So I've had to spend the last week with my brother and my father solving the puzzle of how do we keep our people safe? How do we keep the lights on? And how do we not disrupt supply chain? And juggling those constant issues, which I know a lot of you are doing as well, especially friends that are joining us from the nonprofit space. I'm sure you've seen some donations dry up already and you're worried about what's going to happen next. This is all an incredibly fraught time. I feel like we are all juggling Jell-O that is full of grenades and doing the very, very best we can. And one of the reasons that this is all so hard is that information is rapid and coming out really quickly. So I, for that job as COO, am largely in charge in our company of watching all the news briefs and reading everything and summarizing it for my brother and my father. So Dr. Erin has been helping me with that a lot the last week. So really quick, to combat any misinformation that may be flying around out there, we're going to give you the facts that we have from the CDC and from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. We are located in Pennsylvania and very proud to be in the Commonwealth. That's right. And so these are the facts as we have them. So coronavirus is a large family of viruses. It's called 19 because it was discovered in 2019. And it affects the coronaviruses as a family affect human and animals. The 2019 version is this virus that causes respiratory illness. It's why you haven't really heard about it before, because this new evolution is the respiratory problem. It has flu-like symptoms, but it has a much higher mortality rate than flu. At the beginning of all of this, nigh on 2 weeks ago, people were saying this isn't a really big deal because it's just the flu, and that might be one of the bigger lies that started going around. It is not. It's the flu on super soldier serum. It is not messing around. It's spread through close contact, sneezing or coughing. My physician says that they find that it lives a lot in like mucous membranes, so your nose, things like that, without touching an object or a surface with the virus on it. It lives at different rates on different surfaces. This is something that we in the business community, especially in manufacturing, have been really wrestling with. How long does it live on the things that we make? How long does it live on the equipment that our employees touch? How long does it live on things like doorknobs? And how long does it live on things like the corrugated cardboard I need to, whatever. So it does live at different rates on different surfaces, and there's great information on the CDC website about specific breakdowns if you are curious. It has been declared a global pandemic. The virus is present on 6 of the 7 continents, and I'm fairly sure we'll get Antarctica the longer this thing goes on. Most world governments now are working to flatten the curve through large-scale shutdowns and closures. Just before we started filming, the airlines have shut down in and out of Abu Dhabi. We've got Singapore closed, Hong Kong closed to all people who don't live there, Australia, New Zealand as well. And then here in the United States, we're doing more of a state-by-state response. But for instance, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we are pretty much on a shelter in place for everybody. So is California and Illinois and a whole host of other places. So this is something that governments are taking seriously, and we hope everyone else is too.
So that is what we do know so far about COVID-19. There's a heck of a lot that we don't know. It's one of the things we don't know, kind of the biggest one, is how long these long-term effects are going to go. So we don't know how long the virus will spread and continue to thrive. That's one of the biggest fear-inducing parts of this. We don't know how long it will take to develop treatments and vaccines. Best case scenario, 15 months, 18 months before we have a viable vaccine. And Dr. Kristen and I were just talking about this morning, like, this is not something that can be rushed, nor should we want it to be rushed. It's very, very scary and frightening that it will take this long. But I think that's probably a good parameter for understanding how long we will be dealing with this in some form or capacity on an almost everyday basis is how long until we can actually get a working vaccine. We do not know whether the virus will return again at another time. There's a lot of people talking about, it'll die down over the summer in the warmer months. What if it comes back in the fall? That is a big concern. We don't have any idea how long any of these preventative measures will be in place and how long we will be doing things like sheltering in place and restricting our access to businesses and services. We certainly don't know what the short and long-term impact will be on things like the economy, the healthcare systems, government operations, and everyday life. You can spend a lot of time on Twitter trying to read what other people are writing to find out, but it's a lot of guesswork right now because we just don't have enough information. We do not know how long it will take to return to normal or what normal business operations will look like moving forward from this. We won't go back to the way things were, but as close as it gets to normal, we don't know. And we also have no idea what future adaptations and adjustments we will have to make as we move through these very uncertain times. So lest you think that was panic-inducing, because it was a lot of scary stuff, we realize. Everybody just pause and take a breath. Try as best you can not to panic at any given moment. We're going to try and spend the rest of the webinar being practical, pragmatic, and give you some tips on how we can address all of this uncertainty.
One of the best ways to think about this that we can give you both from practical business owner experience and also folks who study the human brain and how societies function is to come up with new routines and plans. One of the things that is so disruptive emotionally for so many people right now is that routines don't make sense anymore or they don't exist. So folks that are on social media saying create a routine for yourself, and you may be rolling your eyes if you're working from home and you've never done that, that can be really, really helpful. You do have a routine every day, whether you realize it or not. It could be flexible, but it's still a routine. And so businesses have the same thing. We do payroll at a certain time, fundraisers for nonprofits at a certain time. We move in rhythms as humans, and those rhythms have been completely disrupted. So first of all, hear from both of us that the impact is massive, and any anxiety you are feeling, any frustration, any grief that you are feeling over canceled events is very common, and dare we say it, normal. Mm-hmm. So don't shame yourself or anybody else for being really sad or feeling out of sorts right now. We are we are desperately shaming all the kids that went to spring break, we'll admit. But we are at the same time trying to remember, both as business partners and as a business family, that we are all doing the best we can at any given moment. Mm. So we do know a couple things that are going to impact the culture. Like we just said, we don't know a whole lot, but there's some really educated guesses that we can make. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So obviously communication's a big one. If this is your very first webinar, welcome.
Welcome to the world of Zoom.
It's a beautiful place, and lots of people have been telecommuting and working from home for a long time, but a large majority of the work population has not. Even this is down to a lot of my friends are pastors, and all of them trying to figure out how to have church on Facebook Live is hilarious. And also just reminded me how much we need more technology training in the world right now. Mm-hmm. But the process of adapting, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you manage people working from home? How, right now, I think it's working from home and also homeschooling kids for a lot of people. This is not what it's going to look like forever, but working from home may look like what it looks like forever for more people than it did, if that makes sense. So the reality right now, exactly as it looks, is certainly going to shift, but elements of this may hang around.
Certainly. And as you talk about the way that communication has changed and the way that we communicate with each other, this is fundamentally an issue of job structure. And Dr. Kristen has had to spend the last few weeks looking at job descriptions and duties and shifting that around to decide how to keep the business open. I saw a news report yesterday that was talking about a very famous deli in New York and how they were trying to keep everyone in business are everyone employed, all of their people employed, and how they, they have busboys anymore. So they're putting busboys on a different task, bus people, so that they can try and keep as many people employed as possible. We're trying to fit all of these new health guidelines and give space for cleaning and stocking and restocking the businesses that are open. So how we work and how we work with each other is shifting on a weekly basis at this point.
On a minute by minute basis in some cases.
Mm.
The last one for this particular slide that we just want to cover really quickly, and we don't want to belabor the point because we all realize it, but like healthcare is going to have to shift in the United States and globally. We have, in literally every country I've been paying attention to, this has highlighted massive gaps in healthcare systems. There was an op-ed this morning in the German national paper that there's massive gaps in the German system that this has highlighted. I've read it about the NHS, and I've read it about the healthcare system in Uruguay, for instance. So this is a big deal. In the United States, we're going to have to really think about how we deal with coverage and offer coverage. We've already been federally mandated to offer more sick pay than we've ever been federally mandated to do so before. There's a lot of work around how to take care of people's physical bodies that we as employers perhaps have been able to ignore. It's been maybe more of a question of morality than practicality, and that has now shifted.
So one of the big ways that is changing the way we work with each other is the lack of networking that is now taking place. A lot of events have been scaled back or canceled. I've seen a lot of them move online. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the way we connect with people about our business is in person, and that's being disrupted. So we're having to adapt to ways of connecting and maintaining business relationships in different spaces and in different ways. So that's certainly something that we're going to see change, particularly as we look at prolonged restrictions on groups of people together in spaces. So the beauty of online spaces that exist is that we can continue to network and talk about our businesses with our colleagues and our friends. But the access of that is something that we're also going to have to consider moving forward.
Obviously, the economy has changed and will continue to change. In my experience in working with a lot of small business folks and folks outside of business, perhaps people who are not in leadership positions, there's a lot of very emotional language being used right now about how to fix the economy and how to help people eat and how to do that. All of that is very valid. But the economy is a lot more complicated than a lot of folks give it credit for. I know that sounds nuts, perhaps, but like if you have any sort of anxiety over trying to figure out how to read the stock market, you can probably understand that there's a lot of things you don't know. And there's a lot of things that I don't know. And there's a lot of things that everybody doesn't know. A lot of folks are probably going to try to capitalize on that in the next little bit, because unfortunately we do have some, we've already had a US elected official indicted for legally, but emotionally kind of hung out to dry for these kind of behaviors. The best thing that my financial planner is telling me to do is not panic and to breathe a little bit. We don't know what stimulus packages are going to look like. We do know that some governments have offered, really good kind of pausing. For instance, the United States, like no taxes are now due till June. So that'll give people some time to work things out. We don't know what this is going to look like. And so anyone who is trying to panic, convince you, might be selling something, would be my small bit of advice.
And finally, before we get into our tip section, obviously this is going to change the way people lead and people manage. And it has been very, very difficult, I know, for a lot of people in leadership and management positions trying to scramble to keep their people safe in their work environment, to keep their people paid or taken care of. And I cannot imagine the burden that this is putting on business owners around the world, and some of them not appearing to have much of a burden put on them, which is deeply unfortunate as well. But we're going to see a long-term redevelopment of strategies for how we manage people. I think this is a huge, huge moment for leading and managing with emotional intelligence, and the increased burden of mental health awareness that is being put on people in positions of leadership and management as we are all struggling to deal with this crisis. And we'll be talking about that. We'll talk about our upcoming webinars at the end of this one, but we will specifically be addressing mental health and trauma in a few weeks' time, because it is that big of an issue.
This is a global war, friends. It just happens to be against a virus and not against a nation state. And that's something that is, and neither Dr. Erin or I feel is too heavy a term for what is happening.
Not in the least.
And so therefore, the very first thing we've got to do as people who are in charge of other people is we've got to learn. We have to learn about new tech and changing policies. Now, the staying informed and active in discussions is a balance. There are people who have more capacity to digest information on your team than perhaps you do. Fine, assign them the job of watching the news reports and telling you a digest if you can't sit and watch for hours. My father can't. He can't watch that. I can. So that's my job right now. So that's part of learning right now. If you have joined us, or you're watching this at any point in time, you are also learning about new technologies and new ways to think about things. So congratulations, give yourselves a gold star for Monday or whatever day you're watching this. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of moving pieces, and having an attitude of learning is going to be really important.
And we talk about this pretty much every single time we do a webinar or a workshop or talk to people in business at any point in time. The issue of communicating and being calm and clear and open, as transparent as you can be. There are obviously restrictions on things you can and cannot say depending on your circumstances and your work environment. But the best thing you can do is communicate as often and as clearly as you possibly can with your employees, your coworkers, your clients, your customers. We are seeing very different examples of this just in the businesses that I follow on social media. And the ones that are ahead of the curve are the ones that are communicating, taking this situation as seriously as is possible. And that is a really, really great business tip, whether we're in a pandemic or not, is communicate as often as you can, as clearly as you can. Write it down, send it in an email, whatever you have to do, but communicate.
As you're communicating and as you're learning, everything is, you're just going to have to adapt. Be patient with yourself, be patient with your staff, be patient with other people. My motto for the last week, because I am one of those business owners that has been losing sleep for a while now over how to make this happen. The names of all my employees and their families are deep on my mind as we make every single decision to keep them safe and keep them employed. And what does that look like? We are all doing the best we can. And right now that's really apparent because we don't have these rhythms that we're used to moving in. But honestly, most of the time, most of us are doing the best we can. So having a spirit of adaptation and learning as you're kind of going along, things that worked yesterday are not going to work tomorrow. Things that worked 30 years ago are not going to work tomorrow. And things that work right now might still work in a couple of weeks and might not. So we're just going to be flexible and gracious with each other. Part of that is figuring out the non-negotiables. What are the things about your organization and about yourself that you cannot move? What are the ethics and the statements you cannot do? For instance, there's economic ones. I have to be able to pay the power bill, but there's also some emotional ones. We will not ever put any of our employees in harm's way for the sake of profit for the company. So what does that look like? How do we do that? How do we navigate that? That's required some adaptability this week.
And finally, I think this is one that we can all identify with, whether in our personal or professional lives. Providing support for people, giving as much space as you can, doing what you can to take care of others, whatever take caring of others looks like, being aware of your employees and their concerns as best you can, and incorporating that into the work that you're doing. Certainly Dr. Kristen just talked about the work that she's having to do, but providing any support that you can is fundamental to just ensuring people's health and well-being as we go forward.
So a couple more specific things that I've been thinking about, specifically, how many times can I say that word in 3 minutes? And talking to some other business owners that are in this thing. One of the first things is, do you have a technology plan in place? Well, if you are a business that can work remotely, that can have people in multiple situations, do you have a plan for that? Do you have training? Is there a list of the apps that everybody uses, the subscriptions that you have? For instance, even though we are a manufacturing company and therefore people need to be in the building, the information can be shared on a Trello board. My brother is immunocompromised and has to be home more often than I am. And so he and I communicate via a Trello board, and email and things like that to try to make sure that things are happening. So if there's not one piece of paper that kind of outlines that, it's a great time to put one together. Remember, as we kind of move on from this, that practice makes perfect. As we've all watched in the last couple of weeks, as I was joking about with my pastor friends, in the last couple of days, I should say, not everyone is comfortable with video conferencing. Not everyone is comfortable with all of this, but this is about to be even more of a part of our world than it was before. So hold practice sales meetings over video conferencing. If you are somebody who delivers training in a nonprofit, practice doing it without an audience in front of a camera. Practice doing this. Also, you need to get sales personnel in particular used to the lag time that can come with online communication, so they're not thrown off by it. Online communication is communication. It is slightly different, and so make sure that you're practicing what that looks like. As you are navigating this current reality and even your future one, to be honest, know the official policies of your state and local municipalities so that you can help your team and so that you know what's going on. One of the scariest moments in the last couple of weeks was when an employee came up to us and said, well, Philly is shutting completely down. And we hadn't heard anything and we didn't know what that meant. And it turns out that she heard that from Facebook. And when I got onto the Philadelphia government website, it was much more clear. But if I had been a little bit more on top of things, then I would have been able to look at her and go, no, that's not true. Now, that's a moment of grace and like all of those kind of things. And, we were able to calm her panic pretty quickly. But it was very important in the last couple days that I always knew the language that a government order was using so that I could communicate clearly to our employees. This is deeply, deeply important for schools. If you are somebody in charge of people and you do not have children, please do not forget that schools are a really, really big part of a lot of people's puzzles. Have a clear and easily understood hygiene policy and document it. Right now, as we're in the COVID pandemic crisis, make sure you are writing down everything you have done above and beyond to keep your people safe. Make sure that's documented, not only so that you are keeping track of what has been cleaned or what has been sorted, but so that you can use it as a template for the future. And obviously, it also helps with liability purposes. And remember, like I said, we are all doing our best. God bless us. This is a good time to be transparent with your team. Remind them that you're figuring it out too. Sing High School Musical because we are all in this together. And be firm but gracious. And this is a good time to practice that skill set.
So there are a few ways that we can continue to help your organization if any of what we have said has been helpful. We have rapidly produced a couple of white papers based on research we have done, and they're available on our website. We have a white paper based on this webinar. We have one on remote working and managing remote workers. Specifically, we'll have one up later today on remote working tools, ones that we have found, and also resources for finding even more tools, and a lot of other white papers that might be helpful with some of these issues that we're going through. We will be having mini courses coming out this year on a lot of issues impacting the workplace. I think conflict management is going to be a big one moving forward in this very, very stressful time. So look out for those. And we are also available to remote serve in any way that we can for your organization, lunch and learns, webinars, workshops, and trainings. is a great way to kind of build a community culture, even when we are so separated in a lot of instances. So please reach out to us if there's any way that we can be of help going forward. So we have left a few minutes here for question time. There aren't any questions as of yet in the chat. If anybody has one and they've saved it and would like to ask it, please feel free to type it into the chat. And we'd be happy to answer any and all questions.
And if you're watching this after the live, please know that we are still able and willing to answer questions as we can. So please send an email or a direct message across any of our socials, comment on this post on YouTube, and we'll be happy to address it.
All right. Without any questions, that is everything for us for this webinar. As I said earlier, we will be doing 2 more webinars with this kind of idea of future forecasting in the next 2 weeks. So next Monday, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard, we'll be talking about future forecasting, some social changes that we think we will see to the way we socially engage and the way we do and do not contact each other as humans, and what that could, some potential long-term impacts of that. And then in 2 weeks' time, we will be talking about specifically the impact of mental health and prolonged trauma from this period of isolation and great uncertainty and a lot of fear. So we both have a lot of experience working in post-conflict societies around the world, and we've already seen a lot of very similar societal markers of trauma coming forward in the last few weeks. And so the longer this crisis goes on, the more of those markers we're going to see. And so we'll be sharing our insights and experiences on what we can expect and how we can support each other through that trauma as well.
And we'll see you guys then. Thanks so much for joining us.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.